It did not exist on any map. It had no flag, no army, no constitution. But by 1860, it had reshaped an entire continent and destroyed one of the richest regions on the planet in terms of biodiversity and cultural heritage. This is not a story about people seeking fortune. It is a story about how fortune became a tool and who exactly held that tool, and most importantly, how it worked. On January 24, 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall pulled a yellowish stone from the bottom of a California creek, the size of a thumbnail. He showed the find to his mill owner, John Sutter. Sutter ordered silence. Both men understood. The moment the word got out, everything they had built would no longer belong to them. The word got out within 3 weeks. Marshall died in poverty in 1885. Sutter lost all his land to the onslaught of prospectors who simply occupied his territory, and no court could stop that flood. The discoverers of gold received nothing from it. But here is where the system gives its first crack. The news of gold did not spread by itself. It was sold. Samuel Brannan owned the only hardware store in San Francisco. Before running into the main street in May 1848 with a vial of gold dust and a shout, he quietly rode to every warehouse within 100 miles and bought every shovel, every pickaxe, every gold pan. Supply across the region emptied within a few days. Over the next 7 months, Brannan earned $360,000, roughly $12 million in today's money, without ever picking up a shovel. This was the first axiom of the rush. In conditions of scarcity, the price of the tool always exceeds the value of what it digs. Equipment, flour, boots, and rope sold at 1,000% markup. An egg cost $1, a month's wages in Boston. The gold was still in the ground, yet it was already flowing from the pockets of those who risked their lives into the hands of those who sold risk by the piece. By 1849, 100,000 people had poured into California. By 1850, 300,000. The population of an entire mid-sized state relocated to a wilderness in 2 years. They sailed around Cape Horn, an 8-month journey. They walked on foot through the Panama Isthmus with its malaria. They crossed the prairies where every 20 miles of trail had a new cross. Half arrived without money, only debts and a hope that shrank with every passing day. Among them was Jing Wei, one of tens of thousands of Chinese workers who came to California in search of Gold Mountain, as they called it back home. He spent 3 years in the mines. When in 1852 the state introduced a special tax on gold mining for foreigners, $20 a month, twice the average miner's earnings, Jing couldn't pay it. He stayed on as a day laborer on the railroad. His name survives nowhere. The average miner earned less than an ordinary factory worker in Ohio. Most left California poorer than they arrived, but the system didn't need them to get rich. It needed one thing: for them to show up. Their bodies built roads, their money settled in the stores, their desperation kept labor prices at the lowest level, and that is exactly what made everything else possible. And here is the second moment that usually goes unnoticed. By the mid-1850s, the easy gold was exhausted. A man with a pan at the river had become physically inefficient. In a full day, he could wash only a few cubic meters of rock. Hydraulic mining took its place. The mechanics were simple and merciless. Build a dam and accumulate water in a mountain reservoir. Release it through a metal nozzle at several atmospheres of pressure. Aim the stream at a mountainside and wait. Entire Sierra Nevada slopes turned to liquid mud for a few grams of metal per ton of rock. This was no longer a search. This was industrial dismantling of nature. Hydraulic mining didn't need people. It needed water and capital. He who controls the rivers controls the mining. The first monopoly corporations appeared. They built 900 kilometers of canals, longer than the distance from Munich to Berlin, privatized the waterways, and levied taxes on the right to pan gold in one's own river. The prospector, the very one who had sold his house and crossed an ocean for his destiny, became a hired worker on someone else's claim. In the decade of the rush, gold worth roughly $2 billion was extracted from California's earth. Roughly 80% of that money settled with merchants, bankers, and infrastructure owners, not with those who dug. The system absorbed the prospectors just as calmly as it absorbed the mountain rock. But this machine had a hidden cost, and someone else was paying it. Millions of tons of sediment settled in the valleys. Rivers silted up. The fertile farmland that fed California sank under meters of mud. Sacramento flooded with every spring thaw. The city was literally raised onto artificial embankments so it wouldn't disappear underwater. This was the first large-scale legal conflict in history between the mining industry and the agricultural sector. In 1884, the court banned hydraulic mining, but by then the landscape had already been changed beyond reversal. Simultaneously, the system was solving the question of population. The indigenous peoples of California, the Yana, the Maidu, the Miwok, the Chumash, had lived here for millennia. There were approximately 150,000 of them in 1848. By 1860, 30,000 remained. A loss of 120,000 people in 12 years. For comparison, more than the entire population of San Francisco at the time, multiplied by 5. The mechanics were as follows. The Act for the Government and Protection of Indians of 1850 authorized the forced labor of any indigenous person by court order. The state paid subsidies to private armed units for pacification of territories. In California's budget records, this appears as administrative expenses. The total payments over 12 years amounted to roughly $1.5 million, a state budget for destruction. Formatted as a line in a table, nobody called it genocide. It was called settlement. Here is what is important to understand. Not one of these mechanisms was accidental. Each one, Brannan's shovels, the corporate canals, the forced labor laws, was a link in a single chain. The system had no headquarters. It required no coordination. It worked because each of its participants acted rationally in their own interest, and the sum of those interests invariably produced a single result: the concentration of capital in the hands of those who controlled the infrastructure. Leland Stanford arrived in California in 1852 to sell provisions to prospectors. By 1861, he was governor of the state. By 1869, one of 4 co-owners of the Transcontinental Railroad, built with federal subsidies in the hands of 12,000 Chinese workers who were paid half as much as white workers and were first to go into the rock face to set the blasts. Then Stanford founded a university in memory of a son who died young. His name stands above the gate of one of the wealthiest universities on the planet. And almost nobody asks where the initial capital came from. By the 1870s, gold itself had ceased to matter. The banking system, the railroads, the telegraph lines, the land monopolies, all of it grew on the yeast of gold. But gold was no longer what they needed. The 300,000 who came for their own destiny became the substrate for building someone else's. The gold rush is taught in schools as a story of entrepreneurship and the American spirit. It is praised for industrialization, the push westward, the creation of a state. All of that is true. And every time a new boom appears, cryptocurrency, oil, artificial intelligence, The same structure reproduces itself. The chaos of hope at the entry point, the monopoly of infrastructure at the exit, and in between, people who were the fuel but remain in the history books as heroes. Here is the question this history leaves open. If a system that destroyed the ecology of an entire region, exterminated its indigenous population, and turned hundreds of thousands of people into fuel for someone else's enrichment, if that same system also builds universities, lays railways, and creates the infrastructure we call civilization, then how exactly do we tell development from destruction? And who, next time, at the next boom, will have the right to draw that line?